This is News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri, and we're going to be having our hashtag Africa Focus feature this morning. This is a part of a show where we zoom into the continent of Africa and unpack some of the most pressing headlines that are making the rounds on the continent. And this time around, we'll be turning our attention to Burkina Faso, where a major democratic institution has just been erased. The country's military rulers have dissolved the Electoral Commission, calling it a waste of money and placing future elections under direct state control. This is just months after they've extended their grip on power until at least 2029. And this is all the doing of Ibrahim Traoré and, the newly, made up government that he leads this after the coup that has taken place in that country. On paper, if you look at it, the justification sounds somewhat patriotic, limiting foreign influence. We know how elections can be influenced by foreign powers, especially in a country as vulnerable as Burkina Faso at this moment. And he's also trying to reinforce sovereignty. But on the ground, when you look at it, questions are growing about independence and a somewhat authoritarian consolidation, especially looking at Ibrahim Traoré and some of the promises that he has made in Burkina Faso. He's been lauded as a new school, new age kind of African leader. He's very practical in his approach of things. He was looked at as the first of his kind, the first of a generation that is post-colonial Africa that has lived under, I think, a failed leadership, a promised leadership from Africa's rulers or governments that have come after the colonial era. And it will be interesting how people view and see the step from Captain Ibrahim Traoré. And this morning we'll be unpacking a bit of that with Orapeleng Matshediso. He's a research associate at the University of Johannesburg, and he's also a very astute analyst when it comes to the continent of Africa. And we're asking the question, is Ibrahim Traoré a bold reformer that is carving a new path for Burkina Faso and for Africa? Or is he just another strong man tightening his grip under the gaze of sovereignty? A lot of people saying we've seen this movie before. It has happened numerous times on the continent of Africa. But is this really the case with Ibrahim Traoré? To help us unpack all of this, Orapeleng Matshediso joining us via our virtual platform. Orapeleng, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on Salam Media. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Good morning, Silailo and listeners of the Salam Media.
I think we can kickstart the conversation with just the analysis of Ibrahim Traoré. It's been a few years since he took over Burkina Faso in a military coup. There's been a lot of promises that have been made. He's been lauded as a new generation African leader. Just your analysis of that point to where we find ourselves, where the electoral body of Burkina Faso has essentially been scrapped and he's consolidated power until 2029. Is this a movie we've seen play out before on the African continent, or is this something different, as many are suggesting?
No, Silailo, I think first and foremost, let me say, Ibrahim Traoré, we may say that he got into power through military means, but the people in Burkina Faso and those who have joined him, they call themselves Sankarists, meaning they are saying they want to complete what their former president, Thomas Sankara, has started in terms of making sure that Africa and Burkina Faso in particular actually is decolonized and the resources of that particular country benefit their own people. So I think we should look at it from that particular point rather than just saying we've seen this particular movie or not. Because even those who are calling for democracy in Burkina Faso and the Sahel region, from ECOWAS and African Union. They are merely meaning democracy determined and defined by the West, meaning liberal democracy, which has not assisted to deliver the expected goods to the people of Africa and Burkina Faso in this particular instance. Now, let me come to the issue of the dissolution of the Electoral Commission in Burkina Faso. I think what we need rather to do, we need to say Burkina Faso at least is starting something which must actually spark a debate within our continent. The debate that says, is this electoral commission really assisting in advancing the decolonial agenda? Are the people appointed in this electoral commission on our continent understand the decolonial agenda of our continent? And further, ask ourselves questions. Is the electoral commission advancing the new liberal or liberal democracy as a means of democracy? Is Africa having its own definition of what democracy is that is actually tailor-made, resonate with its socio-cultural dynamics?
Very, very important, to mention that. I understand the first point that you're making, the fact that, these commissions, and we've seen it in a lot of other parts of the world before, where electoral commissions and elections have been influenced by foreign kind of powers, foreign kind of bodies, and looking at Burkina Faso and just how a country can be very, very vulnerable after the transition that they have, then the question is, how do you now kind of coil those concerns that this is not actually a movie we've seen before, and it could be something that as Africa can look into, a discourse that we can start having about elections and just our means and ways of governance, which, to be honest, in themselves have come through colonial powers.
Sililo, I think what is also important, maybe before I answer that question, is to understand that elections are but part of the broader consolidation of what democracy means in the current context. It is not the menu per se; it's an item within the menu. The democracy that we want is democracy that is, of course, resonating with our socio-cultural dynamics. Democracy that is able to say there is a governance in place that, of course, uses and manages the resources of our country to change the lives of our people. Ibrahim Traoré, in my view, even though it's not said, but in my view, Ibrahim Traoré is resuscitating the plan that African leaders adopted in the post-colonial era, the most progressive plan called the Lagos Plan of Action, which it entails, among other things, Africa that advances its own economic self-reliance, where resources of the country or the continent benefit the people of the country. Because development currently, as is coined by IMF and World Bank, it means development is only measured by the economic growth, but not necessarily by how that economy transforms the lives of the people. The Ibrahim Traoré scenario, it is not just another movie as people want to coin it, but it is an advancement of the revolutionary plan that was adopted by the African leaders in 1980, the Lagos Plan of Action. Ibrahim Traoré is implementing it, even though he's not pronouncing it, but in my view, he is advancing and implementing that. We can't speak about a democracy that does not actually change the lives of the people. People can vote ritually, as after 5 years elect a leader, but if that particular government that take over does not change the lives of the people, is still a government that serves the interest of the colonizers. It is not democracy in the context of what I understand democracy as an African. But let me just say, make a practical example, Lilo. hail Ghana as one of the best democracies because of how elections are held and so on and so forth. But the question is that in Ghana, I've just read recently, in Ghana, for an example, they went to elections, they are declared democratic and so on and so forth. But we've got an unemployment rate that is rising in Ghana. They are sitting almost at 15%, and more than 25% of that unemployment are young people. And we've got 70% of those who are employed, particularly youth and women, who are in an informal sector. There is this issue of even illegal, what is called illegal minings in Ghana and many African countries, including here in South Africa. But the question that we need to pose is that how do we then arrive to the point of saying this government is legitimate and the other one is illegitimate? If we've got a government that, of course, elects leadership that does not serve the interest of the society, and the government that, of course, went through military coup, and we see it serving the interest of the Africans, which one is legitimate? Is the one that serves the interest of the society legitimate, or the one that is pronounced by the West as illegitimate, legitimate, and serving the interest of the West? That then I think as Africans we need to enter into a debate to say, how do we then declare a government illegitimate in this particular context? Because America managed to give African leaders and Africans a inclination that a democracy without liberal democracy is nothing, and there is no other option, because this one to them is a sacred system of government that can be able to advance the interest of the society, in which in practicality it does not.
Are we not maybe just witnessing the creation of a somewhat new military authoritarian model in West Africa, and one that's becoming more normalized, especially across the Sahel region? Where do we draw the line between that and a complete military authoritarian state?
I think what needs to happen and what we need to understand, we need to look at this from this particular perspective, that these military coups, of course, in Western Africa emerged as a result that the people have become impatient with the government that continues to have the ties with the colonial powers. Now they are taking over through that particular process. But however, I say we need to look at this from a perspective to say, can't we start a genuine debate about what type of democracy do we want on the continent, and how do we then democratize our continent within our own definition of what democracy is? Because I still maintain we might say that those particular coups are undemocratic, but are undemocratic defined by the template given to us. I think we need to start a debate about that, and after that arriving to a conclusion and avoid what might be, of course, military the authoritarian government, which is not what I really want to see. But I want us to say, let's use this not only to just criticize it, let's look at it to spark a debate to say, is Ibrahim Traoré also trying to build the type of African states that actually we aspire as Africans within that particular context? But we need also to check to see how do we then avoid situation that is happening in South Sudan, where the country is in transition forever. There is no that particular elections. But I want election not to be seen as the what you call a ritual election, and post that 5 years, those who are elected, they continue to exchange resources of the continent, neglecting the people. You would remember, Slylo, maybe making example, Kwame Nkrumah, when he took over in Ghana, what he said is that really it's something that we need to look into. We can't have Ghana being the second largest country on the continent in terms of cacao, but it does not have a mere factory of chocolate or coffee factory. And those are what Traoré is advancing industrialization in order to create jobs and ensure that the resources of the country benefits the people of those but of that particular country. And we must understand this with this debate within the context that the issue of counter hegemony and hegemony of the post-colonial state has not been sufficiently addressed, because we still have Africans who see themselves as West modern Africans. And how do we then, when we enter into this debate, we holistically engage without excluding them or labeling them, but saying we are all Africans. But this is the common agenda of the Agenda 2063 that all of us must commit unto.
Just one last question, Orapeleng, before I let you go. If this was done in South Africa, if the IEC was dissolved and one party or one leader was consolidating power for the next 4 or 5 years, would you welcome this move here in democratic South Africa?
Not necessarily, Slylo. If you were to ask me about my view with regard to the dissolution of that electoral commission, I would say to you that I think Traore's government, what they could have done, they could have rather reformed the electoral system and allow it to be not actually necessarily be put under a particular ministry, because that leader of that particular ministry might be contesting elections again in 2029. Then the question will actually create another dispute and conflict with regard to say the electoral commission is advancing the interest of those who are already in power. Let's say, that's why I started saying, can't we also have a debate about who are the people who are appointed to serve in those electoral commission? Do they understand the agenda of our continent in terms of decolonialism? So I think he could have maybe rather reshuffle the people who are serving in that electoral commission if they are not serving the interest of the country, and of course reform and appoint the team so that at least they should be that particular the checks and balances in terms of the understanding of how governance functions within that particular country. Because I would say, that's what I'm still saying, Slylo, for as long as we have elections and the outcomes of those particular elections do not change the lives of the people on the ground, it is meaningless to have those particular government and declare them legitimate, those government legitimate. Let me just part in short, make this particular. In South Africa here and in Ghana, recently there is this issue of the so-called illegal miners, or which I call them artisanal miners. And both countries, they've got laws that, of course, they promise to see to it that actually they empower those who are actually mining to ensure that at least they benefit out of the resources of their own countries. But when you look at things, the big companies that, of course, are declared legal, and those who are mining are declared illegal. The mining artisanal miners are declared illegal. In my view, both of them, I can say they are illegal. The only thing is that these ones who serve the interest of the captains of industries who have actually co-opted our leaders, they've got at least institutions that can declare them legitimate, because at the ultimate end, all of them, they mine for their own benefit at the ultimate end, because those companies, the peers and many others that are even in South Africa, they are serving their own interest, and they are not serving the interest of the population. But of course, they are declared legal. These ones are declared illegal, but all of them at the ultimate end are illegal, because the very same means that these artisanal miners are using in Ghana and even in South Africa before the event of technology, the very same DPRs were exploiting our people using the very same route. But unfortunately, our African leaders, they have lost a Pan-Africanist agenda and the interest of the people. They advance the interest of their colonial masters.
No, definitely. Orapeleng Matshediso, Master's Graduate Institute at Pan-African Thought. And I think one of our most favorite Africa analysts. Really appreciate you giving us your time. And hope we chat again in the not so distant future.
Thank you very much.
There you go. That was Orapeleng Matshediso. And I think, yeah, unpacking something that's very, very different. What do you think? Do you think African countries should start, as Orapeleng is suggesting, considering alternatives to Western style democracy, especially when it was in itself introduced through colonial regimes that never practiced it themselves? And what if this happened here in South Africa? What if came a leader from whatever organization, party, individual who says, we're scrapping the IEC, we're going to be consolidating power until 2029, we're trying to sort ourselves out. Elections have become I don't know, they've become compromised in a lot of ways. They've been compromised by foreign parties, they've been compromised internally, and they don't necessarily reflect the will of the nation. Would you appreciate that? Would you say, yeah, that's maybe the route that we should be going? This 30 years of democracy has yielded nothing for common South Africans on the ground, and we need to rethink governance and what it means ultimately for the country. You can send us a voice note, 061 766 0355. Do you still prefer democracy, or should we start thinking about alternatives when it comes to how we govern ourselves on the African continent? 061 766 0355. That was our hashtag Africa Focus feature. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be with you after this.